Hey guys, tonight we're sinking into a slow burn descent. One of those quiet, creeping stories that starts with something small, a whisper, a message, something written where it shouldn't be. There's condensation on the glass, sure, but then you realize the words came from inside the house. And as always, you probably won't make it out of this one either. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It started with one of those oddly warm nights in early October, the kind where the air feels too still, like it's waiting for something. I remember because I'd cracked the window for just a bit of airflow, but when I woke up the next morning, it was fogged over. Thick condensation painted the entire pane, as if the humidity had crept inside the room and stayed the night. I didn't think much of it, not at first. I shuffled to the kitchen, made some half-hearted coffee, and wandered back into my bedroom while rubbing the sleep from my eyes. That's when I saw it. There in the window, written in long smudged strokes, letters traced in the moisture, were two words: stay asleep. Just that, all caps, no punctuation. I blinked. For a second I thought I'd written it myself, half dreaming. I've been known to do weird stuff when I'm sleep deprived. Once made an entire pot of oatmeal without realizing I'd already eaten breakfast. But writing ominous messages to myself, that was new. Still, I grabbed a towel and wiped the message clean. The glass squeaked under the pressure, and I pressed my fingers against the inside of the pane, just to be sure. The message had definitely been written from the inside. No streaks on the exterior, no trail of moisture outside. Just me, alone in my room, with foggy glass and a leftover sense of wrongness. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I'd subconsciously done it. Maybe it wasn't even letters, just coincidental marks my brain arranged into words because I was groggy and jumpy. Pareidolia, right? It's the same trick your mind plays when it sees faces in clouds or monsters in piles of laundry. But even then, even as I made all the excuses, my skin felt tight. That kind of stretched, buzzing sensation you get when someone's watching you and you don't know where they are. I opened the window all the way and let the rest of the condensation dry out, then shut it again and went about my day like nothing had happened. That night I went to bed a little earlier than usual, not out of fear. Exactly, just a weird fatigue that hit me all at once. My body felt like it had sunk into the mattress, like gravity had tripled in just a few hours. I remember thinking, don't fall asleep yet, you didn't lock the back door. Then I was out cold. The next morning, I woke up to a heavy silence, the kind where no birds are chirping, no cars are passing, and the world feels like it's holding its breath. I stretched, sat up, and glanced at the window. It was fogged over again, and there again were the same two words, but this time the strokes looked slightly different, a little sharper, a little more deliberate, like someone was taking their time. Stay asleep. I swallowed hard. I walked up to the window and stared at it for a long time, daring myself to find a logical explanation. There had to be one. I live alone. No pets, no overnight guests, no roommates. Then the weirdest part, the window was still locked from the inside. There are a lot of classic horror moments you don't expect to stumble into during a Tuesday morning. Creepy dolls, hidden staircases, cold spots. That standing there in my socks, staring at a fogged-up window with a ghostly memo scrawled on it. That felt like a red flag even I couldn't ignore. Still, denial's a hell of a drug. I wiped the window again. This time, I made sure to really scrub the glass. I cleaned it with vinegar, dried it. I even smudged the whole pane with a sleeve to disrupt whatever writing had been there, like that'd make it, I don't know, less real. Then I spent the rest of the day checking every possible entrance, door locks, window latches, even the crawlspace hatch in the hallway closet. Nothing had been disturbed. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. No signs of forced entry, no weird residue, no footprints. Just me, in my own home, trying not to feel like I'd woken up in someone else's dream. That night, I left the window closed and locked. I also kept the blinds shut and duct taped the edges to be sure they wouldn't flutter or shift in the breeze. Yes, I have duct tape on hand. What if you need to fake a hostage situation for fun? Kidding. Mostly, I didn't sleep well. Every creak of the floorboards sounded closer than it should have. Every shift in the house's old bones echoed just a bit too long. But the thing that truly kept me awake was the window itself, because even with the blinds taped down, I swore I could feel light behind them. Not warm yellow light, like from a street lamp. No, a faint bluish glow, cold and too bright, like the kind you see in hospital corridors when you're wheeled out of surgery and you're not quite awake yet. I didn't check it, not that night. Some part of me, something old, like childhood fear, told me not to look. When I woke the next morning, I peeled back the tape, raised the blinds, and stared at the window. This time, the condensation wasn't from the night air, it was from inside the room, and written there again, waiting for me like a cruel reminder, were the same two words: stay asleep. I touched the glass. It was warm. I didn't leave my room for a while after that. I just stood there, staring at the message through the soft morning haze. You know that moment when you realize you've moved past the boundaries of what's normal, like you're standing just outside the rules of the world you thought you knew. Yeah, that. The warmth on the glass wasn't just from the morning sun. I pressed my palm to it again, flat and firm, and it felt like it was radiating outward, not hot exactly, more like the warmth of another person standing too close, intimate, invasive. I should have called someone, a friend, a neighbor, maybe even the police, just to say, hey, something's off here. Though what would I say? Hi, I think my window is trying to tell me something. No, I don't think it's a prank. Yes, I live alone. No, I haven't hit my head recently. Instead, I turned and left the room. Towards I went to the kitchen and made myself another pot of bitter coffee. My hands were shaking, which made pouring a delicate operation. Halfway through, adding sugar, I laughed, just once, a weird choked out sound, because in that moment, it hit me that I'd never actually tried to stay asleep since the messages started. Whatever it or they were trying to tell me, maybe it wasn't a threat, maybe it was a warning. That afternoon, I drove into town, desperate for noise and motion, anything to interrupt the static fog rolling through my mind. I stopped at a local bookstore I liked, one of those cozy, half-forgotten places that smell like cedar and ancient paper, and loitered in the metaphysics section, even though I never really believed in that stuff. I skimmed spines, lucid dreaming, sleep paralysis, dream visitations, spirit communication, a lot of woo-woo, but some of the titles tugged at something familiar. I flipped open a paperback with a torn cover and scanned a passage about the thinning, the belief that in certain states of consciousness, especially during sleep, we brush up against other realities, not just dream states, but adjacent layers of existence. I closed the book and quietly put it back on the shelf. Something about it made the air taste metallic. I drove home slowly, trying to convince myself that what was happening was probably some kind of elaborate sleepwalking scenario. Maybe I was writing those words in my sleep and forgetting. Maybe my body was moving while my mind stayed unaware. Except, I always woke up in bed. Always. And the blinds stayed taped, and the window stayed locked. That night, I took precautions. I set up my phone on the dresser, with the camera pointed straight at the window. I hit record, and left the screen facing down, so the light wouldn't keep me awake. I also propped an old folding mirror on the nightstand, angled just enough to catch the edge of the glass in its reflection, just in case something tried to write again. Then I went to sleep, or rather, I tried to. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like I was sinking, not gently, but pulled under. Like sleep wasn't something I was choosing, but something choosing me. I'd drift off for a few seconds, and then snap awake, heart pounding, body frozen in the in-between, that half-conscious place where shadows breathe and time stretches like taffy. At some point, I gave up trying to fight it. I fell. The dream, if it was a dream, wasn't like any I'd had before. I was in my room, but it wasn't quite right. Everything was too still. The corners of the room were soaked in shadow, darker than dark, and the window glowed faintly in the gloom. Except it didn't show the backyard. There was no familiar fence, no neighbor's porch light. Instead, there was fog, thick, rippling fog, and behind it, something moved. It pressed against the other side of the glass. Not a face, not a shape I could describe, just the sense of presence, intent. Then a finger, long, pale, with too many joints. It reached up slowly and dragged across the inside of the window. The letters bloomed in its wake. Stay asleep. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. I tried to back away, but my legs didn't work. I was locked in place, watching that finger hover, then stop, then it turned. The finger tapped the glass, once, twice, then again. Rhythmic, slow, like a lullaby with bones in it. Tap, 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 and that's when I woke up. Only I didn't, not all the way. I was in my bed, in my real room this time. Or so I thought. Everything looked normal. Morning light filtered through the blinds. My chest ached from holding my breath, and then my phone buzzed. A low, drawn-out vibration on the dresser. I reached for it with numb fingers. The camera app was still running. The phone had recorded all night. Heart jackhammering. I hit play. For the first few minutes, nothing. Just darkness, the still shape of the window, the occasional flutter of my sheets when I shifted in my sleep. Then at 3:17 a.m., the condensation began to form on the inside of the window. I leaned closer. No one approached it. Nothing touched the glass, but the letters appeared, stroke by stroke, as if drawn by invisible fingers. Stay asleep. Then this part made my stomach drop. The video flickered, just for a second. The picture warped, like the lens had bent, and when it stabilized, my reflection was gone from the mirror. I should have been visible, curled in bed, but the mirror showed nothing but a smooth, pale sheet, and the slowly writing handprint on the glass. Then the phone vibrated again. This time, it was a notification. Video playback error. File corrupted. Of course it was. I turned toward the window, throat dry, skin crawling. I didn't need the video to tell me what I'd see. Condensation, and beneath it, once more, fresh and perfect like always. Stay asleep. I left the house that morning like it was on fire. Not literally though, my nerves sure felt scorched. I didn't even grab my bag, just my phone, my keys, and a half-full cup of coffee I'd abandoned earlier. I sat in my car, engine idling, hands clamped around the wheel, like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. Eventually, I drove, aimless, just long enough to convince myself that sunlight still meant safety, and gas stations still sold gum, and nobody else had phantom messages appearing on their windows. I pulled into the lot behind a diner I used to go to when I couldn't sleep. Ironic, I know. It was the kind of place that always smelled like burnt bacon and dish soap, with cracked red booths and a waitress who called everyone on. I ordered black coffee and pretended to scroll my phone. Instead, I opened my camera roll and stared at the corrupted thumbnail of last night's footage. Still no preview, still glitched, just that grainy swirl of static with a timestamp, and the words "file can't be opened." Of course it couldn't. A kid in the next booth kept staring at me over his waffle, To Ceres, I realized I must look like I hadn't slept in days, which wasn't far from the truth, and offered a weak smile. He leaned toward his mom and whispered something. She turned to look at me, then quickly looked away, like she'd seen something she didn't want to acknowledge. To Ceres, that's when I started keeping notes. If I couldn't capture whatever was happening on video, I'd document it by hand. Every sound, every dream, every shift in the air. I'd log it, timestamp it, track it like a pattern, because maybe there was a pattern. Maybe it was trying to tell me something more. That night, I left my phone charging and set up a notebook and pen on the nightstand. I told myself I'd wake up and write down anything I could remember. I didn't fall asleep writing. I fell asleep watching the window, and it was waiting for me. Fog rolled in just after 2 a.m. I saw it blooming behind the blinds, like something exhaling. Not outside, inside. It crept out from beneath the sill, coiling across the floor, like spilled smoke. I sat up, chest tight, breath shallow, and looked straight at the window. The words weren't there this time. Instead, there were shapes, smudges, fingerprints, no, claw marks, maybe, arcs and crescents, and something that looked like a spiral, pressed in from the other side. Except when I stood up to touch the glass, it was on my side, the inside. Again, something had drawn these from inside the room. Dispose, in place, notebook in hand, pen uncapped, and then I heard it. Shish, right behind me. I turned so fast I nearly fell, but there was no one there, no one behind me, no one in the room. It hadn't come from my imagination. It had that weight, that thrum, that only real sound has in the dark, a hush that feels intentional, like something telling you not to move, not to look. I backed away slowly, until my knees hit the bed, then sat down with my back against the headboard, and my eyes fixed on the glass. The fog on the window had begun to clear, revealing a slow movement behind it, like a silhouette pacing. To Ceres, I picked up the notebook and scribbled furiously, the pen shaking in my grip. I wrote down everything: time, temperature, where the fog started, what it looked like, even the way the air smelled faintly metallic, like the breath of something old. And then, a new message began to form. This one didn't scrape in all at once. It came letter by letter, painstakingly slow, as though being written with something blunt. Stay. The second word took longer. The letters wobbled slightly, smeared at the ends, like the writer was uncertain. God help me. Excited. I inside. Stay inside. Just my hand clamped around the pen so hard it snapped. I dropped it, and watched, wide-eyed, as the final period appeared. Just a tiny dot, pressed into the mist, deliberate and neat. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I didn't even blink. I sat cross-legged on my bed, arms tucked close, feeling like if I moved an inch, the world would tilt open and drop me into something I couldn't crawl back from. Morning came slow and golden, like honey spilling across the floorboards. I should have felt safer in daylight, but instead, the house felt more like a shell, hollow, watching me back. I cleaned the window with a rag and some old glass cleaner, scrubbing until the cloth came away damp and smeared with condensation and something darker, a streak of grayish residue I couldn't identify. I told myself it was mildew. My hands disagreed. Downstairs, I opened every window, every single one. Let the air breathe. Let me breathe. Because I was starting to get the feeling the messages weren't just warnings anymore. They were instructions. That's it. And if they were instructions, that meant someone or something was giving them. Not a figment of my subconscious, not some dream-spun hallucination. Someone was writing to me from inside my locked, empty house. I didn't go to work that day. I texted in sick, though I left out the part about staying up all night. watching my window get cryptically vandalized from within. Not exactly something HR would appreciate. I wasn't ready to talk to people anyway, not while my thoughts felt like wet paper, barely holding shape, tearing under the weight of whatever was pressing in. Instead, I tried to figure it out. I approached the whole thing like a mystery. Maybe that sounds weird, but it gave me something to do, something that felt less helpless than pacing from room to room or jumping at the hum of the fridge. I even Googled things like sleep writing and paranormal fog patterns, which got me nothing helpful, and a lot of haunted Reddit threads. By midday, I had 3 solid theories, each worse than the last. I was losing my mind. Someone had found a way into my house. Despite the locks, something was already in my house, and always had been. I preferred theory 1, mostly because it made the least sense, but I couldn't find any evidence of a break-in. All the doors were still locked, windows latched, no scuffs on the floors, no footprints in the dust on top of the bookshelves, no sign of anyone crawling through the attic. Because guess what? No attic, just insulation, and beams and silence. Classic horror movie setup. Haunted house without a crawl space to blame. I spent an hour cleaning everything, vacuuming, wiping down surfaces, even rearranging the bookshelf. Not because it needed it, but because I felt like if I could just reset the house somehow, I'd reset myself too. Tudzard. I left the window for last, not out of dread, exactly, more like reverence, like I was afraid I'd wipe away a warning and invite whatever came next. The marks were gone this time, all of them, no fog, no message, just clean glass, a faint shimmer of daylight, and my own warped reflection staring back at me. Still, I left the rag and cleaner on the sill, just in case. That night, I set up my phone again, this time on a tripod, angled more precisely at the window. I deleted all my old files, and cleared the memory, so nothing could corrupt. I even made sure it had a full charge, and was set to airplane mode. No interference, no excuses. Then I left a fresh page in the notebook, and clicked my pen. Sleep didn't come easy, tossed and turned, hyper aware of every tick and creak. I kept hearing that soft sish in my head, like the house itself was trying to hush me to sleep. The radiator hissed a little, and I startled like it had said my name. Eventually, I must have drifted off, because I woke up to a sound I didn't recognize at first. A gentle tap tap tap, like fingers drumming against the glass. Only when I opened my eyes, and saw the words again, did I realize what had happened. This time, they weren't smeared in fog, or pressed into condensation. They were scratched, stay asleep etched right into the surface of the glass. Not deep, not cracked, but enough to catch the light, enough to feel with your fingertip. To right underneath that, in the faintest jagged scroll, "Don't look back." I sat up, heart racing, ears buzzing with that high-pitched silence that only comes when the world is holding its breath. And in that breathless moment, I realized something else. My phone, the one I'd set up to record the whole night, was no longer facing the window. It had been turned. Now it faced me, its little red recording light, blinking steadily, patiently. I reached for it, hand trembling, and stopped just short, because something about the way it sat on the tripod felt wrong, off kilter, like it wasn't just turned. It had been handled, moved with care. I couldn't bring myself to pick it up right away. Instead, I did what felt safer. I looked at the notebook. Something had written in it, a single line, carved neatly across the top of the page in my own handwriting. Only I hadn't written it. "You woke up too early." I stared at those 5 words until they stopped making sense, until the letters looked foreign, and the spaces between them seemed too wide, too intentional. What did that mean? Was there a correct time to wake up? And what would have happened if I hadn't? I didn't sleep again that night. I waited for morning the way you wait for test results, or a power outage to end, tight-jawed and nauseous. The next day, I called a glass repair company. I didn't mention the scratches, just said the window was damaged and needed to be replaced. When they offered to come that afternoon, I said no, tomorrow. I didn't want strangers in the house, not yet, not until I understood more. Instead, I replayed the footage. At first, nothing, just me, snoring lightly, then a flicker. The camera jolted, shook slightly, then pivoted on its own. It was subtle, almost gentle, but unmistakably deliberate. No person appeared, no hands, just that same muffled tapping sound, soft but rhythmic, and a whisper right before the video cut off. A faint breath against the mic. Stay asleep. The whisper stayed with me. I heard it in the silence between sounds, in the way my sheets shifted when I moved, in the air vent's low exhale. Stay asleep, like it was less of a warning and more of a plea or a command. I couldn't decide which. When the glass repair guy showed up the next afternoon, I lied again, said I had a bird problem, kept tapping the glass until it cracked. I told him, gesturing vaguely toward the window. He didn't press, just nodded, measured the frame, and said he'd be back in 2 days to install a new pane. That meant 2 more nights, with the message still staring at me. The glass was clear, but the words were now permanent. And the really strange part, they looked older in daylight, like they'd been there a long time. Not fresh scratches, but worn, almost smoothed into the surface, as though someone or something had run fingers over them 100 times. That night, I didn't set the camera, I didn't write in the notebook. I just tried to sleep, and I almost managed it, until I heard the laughing. It was faint, childlike, not joyful exactly, but dry and echoing, like someone trying to remember how to laugh. It came from outside, at least I think it did, through the window, maybe, or just behind it. I sat up again, heart thudding, like it had been waiting for permission. The scratching was back, not on the glass this time, on the wall. Long, slow, steady secretary sounds, like a nail or something harder, carving, maybe. Didn't want to look, but I also couldn't just lie there pretending this was fine. So I stood up, grabbed my phone, and turned on the flashlight. Nothing there, just clean drywall, but the sound continued for another minute or so, invisible and mocking. Then silence, not peaceful silence, trapdoor silence, the kind that waits for you to let your guard down. I went to the kitchen, made tea I didn't want, then sat at the table and stared at the steam rising from the mug. Something about the warmth made me feel tethered again, like the heat was the only proof I was still in my own body. I didn't look at the window again that night, didn't even go back to my room. I slept, if you can call it that, on the couch, with the TV on low, and the blanket pulled up to my chin like I used to do as a kid when thunderstorms rolled in, and I thought covers were enough to stop lightning. In the morning, I found something new. The notebook left untouched on my nightstand was now on the coffee table, open to a blank page, and in the same handwriting, the same weird calm strokes. Another note had been added. Too late now. It's almost in. I didn't go back to my room that day, didn't even walk past it. I stayed in the kitchen mostly, sipping tea that had gone cold, scrolling through my phone, like I was looking for a version of reality that would contradict what was happening. Something to say this was just stress, or sleepwalking, or grief-induced psychosis. Something, but all I found was silence. Even the birds outside were quiet. No rustling in the trees, no distant lawnmowers or dogs barking, just the faint hum of appliances and my own breathing, too loud in the stillness. Around noon, the mail arrived. I heard the slot open, the soft thunk of envelopes hitting the floor, and I jumped, which is ridiculous, but I got up anyway, grateful for the break in tension, and shuffled over bills, a grocery flyer, and one thick, unmarked envelope. No return address, no stamp, just my name, in handwriting that made my stomach twist. The same strokes, the same pressure. Inside was a single Polaroid, my bedroom window, taken from the outside, and in the photo, a face, just behind the glass, smiling, but wrong, blurred, like a smudge on a mirror, eyes where the reflection should be. I called the police, not because I thought they'd help, but because I needed to hear another person's voice. I needed to do something. An officer came by, tall guy, polite, mid-30s. He looked at the scratches, the photo, the notebook, and kept the same neutral expression through all of it. Took notes, said he'd log it, suggested I might have a stalker, a neighbor with a twisted sense of humor, he said. But when I asked him if he could see the scratches on the window, he frowned. What scratches? I pointed, pressed his finger to them. He shook his head. There's nothing there. And when I held the Polaroid up for him, he blinked. Just a photo of your window, he said. Is there something I'm supposed to be seeing? I didn't try to explain, didn't mention the way the room had gone colder when he stepped inside, or how the lights flickered once, briefly, when he picked up the notebook, or how, when he left, he seemed to forget which direction the front door was in, just for a second, like he'd never been here before. I stood there, staring after him, feeling like the house had rearranged itself behind my back. That night, I didn't sleep on the couch. I didn't sleep at all. I sat at the kitchen table with every light on, my phone in one hand, and a heavy book in the other, like it would make a difference. And just after 3 a.m., the whisper came again. Stay asleep, but this time, it was inside the room. No distortion, no echo, just behind my left ear. And it was followed by something worse, a sound like breathing, close and slow that wasn't mine. I didn't move, not right away. You know that feeling when your body registers something before your brain does, when every hair on your neck lifts in perfect unison, and your breath just halts, like your system's trying to make you invisible. That's what happened when I heard it. That slow, measured breathing, like someone asleep next to me, not behind me anymore. No shifting, no sighing, just a steady inhale and exhale inches from my ear. I wanted to believe it was a trick of sound, maybe the refrigerator compressor or something outside echoing strangely, but the fridge wasn't humming and the air felt too still for echoes. I counted to 10 in my head. Then with agonizing slowness, I tilted my head just a little to the left, enough to catch the edge of my peripheral vision without fully turning. Nothing, but the breathing stopped. That was worse somehow. I stood up, my chair scraping softly against the tile, and walked straight into the hallway without looking back, like if I didn't acknowledge it, it couldn't follow. Childhood logic, but it felt safe, familiar. I made it to the bathroom and locked the door behind me. Not that locks meant anything anymore. I didn't turn on the overhead light, just the soft glow of the night light near the sink. My own reflection stared back at me in the mirror, pale and tired, lips slightly parted, like I'd forgotten how to close my mouth. I wasn't alone. I didn't see anything, but I felt it, like another reflection should have been standing beside me. Like if I blinked too slow, something would shift in the glass. So I stared, held my breath, waited, and then the mirror fogged up, but I hadn't run the sink. There was no steam, just a single word traced in condensation that shouldn't exist. Soon I stumbled back, heart slamming hard against my ribs, and flicked on the full light. It was gone. The word, the fog, the presence, just my reflection again. a little too delayed in its movements. I didn't sleep, didn't go back to the kitchen either. I sat on the bathroom floor, legs pulled up to my chest, the fan humming overhead like a white noise machine for people trapped in horror stories. Eventually, the sun came up, and I told myself that daylight still meant something. That morning, the glass guy came back. He was a little late, which normally wouldn't have mattered, except I'd been counting the minutes since sunrise. He replaced the window quickly, didn't talk much. I didn't either, just hovered nearby, half expecting the message to still be there somehow, like the new glass would take on the same scratches, but it didn't. It looked clean, normal, and when he packed up his tools and left, I almost cried. I even laughed a little, dry and ridiculous, like someone who'd survived a plane crash and couldn't believe the coffee cart was still working. That night, I slept in my bed. The house was quiet. The window was clear. I even cracked it open a few inches, needing air, needing normal. And I did sleep for about 3 hours, until the nightmare started. At first, it was one of those half-lucid dreams where everything feels too real. I was lying in bed, but the room was reversed. The window was on the wrong side. The closet door was wider. The light from the hallway didn't spill in like it normally did. It hung in midair, like it was underwater, and someone was sitting at the foot of the bed. I couldn't see them clearly, just the outline, but I knew they were watching me. And when they spoke, it wasn't with a voice. It was with that now familiar scratch of glass, but louder, etched into the inside of my skull. "You're not asleep enough." I jerked awake with a gasp, cold sweat soaking through my shirt, heart racing. The room was normal again. Mostly, except for the window. It was closed. I know I left it open. And on the glass, a new message had been etched, not scratched, but written in dust. "Stay still." I couldn't breathe. My mouth moved like it was trying to form a prayer I didn't know, but I stayed still. I don't know how long I lay there. Long enough for the dust to settle back down. Long enough to hear the faint creak of floorboards in a pattern that suggested someone else was moving around the house. Eventually, the sound stopped. The message faded, and I forced myself to sit up. The air felt heavier, like breathing in warm static. I glanced around the room. Everything looked technically normal, but something about the angles felt off, like the walls were leaning in just slightly, or maybe the ceiling was lower than it had been yesterday. Dream logic stuff, but I wasn't dreaming. Not anymore. I walked out into the hallway, slowly, testing each floorboard, like it might give way. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. It looked like mine, but the energy was wrong, charged, like I was being watched by something that didn't blink. I checked every room, kitchen, bathroom, spare bedroom, even the coat closet, all clear, and yet I still felt outnumbered. I went back to my room, too tired to function, but too wired to sleep. That's when I noticed the new addition to my notebook. I hadn't opened it, hadn't touched it in days, but there it was, lying open on my desk. Same black pen, same careful lettering. "You're waking up too fast." I didn't understand what it meant, still don't, entirely, but the sense of dread that came with it felt like gravity shifting, felt like I wasn't in a house anymore, just the suggestion of one unraveling quietly around me. The next few days passed in a weird kind of haze. I'd love to tell you I did something brave or decisive, like calling a priest or checking myself into a hotel, but I didn't. I stayed. I stayed because part of me was too tired to move, and part of me wanted to believe this was just some kind of stress spiral, like if I just kept pretending things were normal, they might be again. It was that old logic. If I didn't look directly at the thing in the corner, maybe it wasn't real. Classic horror movie mistake. But hey, I was committed now. By the third day, though, the house had developed habits, little changes. The lights would flicker, not in the usual ghost hunting TV show way, but like they were thinking about something. The air vents whispered, softly, constantly, not words, exactly, but intent, and things would disappear, not big things, not dramatic, just little pieces, a fork, my backup toothbrush, a sock that I know I left in the laundry basket. They didn't just go missing, they went missing with purpose, like the house was gradually unthreading me. By Thursday night, I'd started sleeping on the couch, not because I felt safer there, just because the bedroom had grown too still, like sound didn't move right in that room anymore. And the notebook, it kept writing back. Every time I left it open, something new would appear. One morning, across the top margin, "Don't open your eyes at 3:16. I didn't, but I still felt the presence. When I woke up in the dark, chest heavy, limbs numb, a faint ticking sound echoing from inside the walls. Another day, in a faint, shaky hand. It needs you unconscious. I had no idea what it was, but I knew exactly how it felt. Like the static in your ears right before you pass out. Like the pressure behind your eyes when you've gone too long without dreaming. That same day, I found something etched again, on the inside of the window pane. Only this time, it was backwards. I only noticed it when the light hit just right in the late afternoon, casting shadows across the glass. It said, "Stay asleep," backwards, from inside. That night, I taped over the window, just a cheap blackout curtain, and duct tape. I didn't care about aesthetics anymore. I just didn't want to see that glass. I didn't want it to see me. It helped, sort of. I managed to get a full 5 hours of sleep, without waking to new messages or sounds. But when I woke up, the blackout curtain was gone, folded neatly at the foot of the couch, like someone had carefully removed it while I slept, and written in soft smeared ink on the wall above me, "You dream louder than you think." That was the tipping point. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't leave a note. I just grabbed my keys and left. I drove for hours with no destination, just enough gas to get me away from that house. Eventually, I ended up parked outside a 24-hour diner, just off the highway, watching the sky lighten from navy to gray blue, and for the first time in weeks, I felt almost okay. There were people nearby, fluorescent lighting, bad coffee, reality anchors. I sat in that parking lot until my legs stopped shaking, and then, stupidly, I checked my phone. One notification, no number, just a message. "You're not out. You're just further in." I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat, like it might bite me. But the real terror, when I looked at the car window beside me, outside the car, there was a fog print, the kind your breath leaves when you're too close to glass, and across it, clear and deliberate, traced with something damp and oily. "Stay asleep." I didn't move, didn't open the door, didn't look around, just sat there. Eventually, the fog evaporated, but I never forgot that shape, how deliberate it looked, like someone had leaned in while I wasn't watching, and whispered through the window without making a sound. That's when I started noticing it in other places, not just at home. Public restrooms, storefront windows, even the screen of my laptop when it went dark. Always in that same shaky hand, always on the inside. The words weren't always the same. Sometimes it was "Don't look behind you," or "If you see it, it's too late." But the message was always clear. I wasn't dreaming. I was being held inside a dream. Or worse, something was building a dream around me, layering it thicker every time I fell asleep, like insulation. I still don't know how deep it goes, but I started testing it, leaving traps, recording myself overnight, asking myself questions in the margins of the notebook. trying to catch the seams, the code behind the dream logic, and for a while, I thought maybe I was getting somewhere. But then came the night I finally tried to stay awake all the way through. No naps, no drifting, no micro dreams, just me, a thermos of black coffee, and a playlist of obnoxious 2000s pop punk to keep me upright. I made it to 3:12 a.m. That's when the power cut out. The apartment went silent. Not dark, silent. There's a difference, you know. Darkness still has texture. You can hear the hum of the fridge, the ticking of the wall clock, the soft breathing of the world continuing just out of sight. But when the power died at 3:12 a.m. that night, it was like someone had vacuum sealed the air around me. No fridge hum, no distant traffic, not even the neighbor's dog, who barked at absolutely everything, including his own tail just hours earlier. I sat there, on the couch, phone flashlight in hand, waiting. I didn't do anything. I didn't even think anything. I just listened, and then I heard it, a soft scraping sound, faint, distant, but unmistakable, like a fingernail dragging across glass. Once, twice, 3 times. It was coming from the bedroom window, the one I'd taped up, the one that kept writing things backward. I stood up, slow, careful, and crept toward the hole, hugging the wall like it could hide me. Every part of my body screamed to stop. Classic horror red flag. But again, I was already halfway into the haunted house. Might as well see if the floor collapsed too. I inched closer until I could peek around the edge of the door frame. The blackout curtain was still in place, but behind it, through it, I could see movement, the gentle bulge, like someone was pressing against the fabric from the outside. No, from the inside. The scraping continued, not frantic, just steady, purposeful, like someone patiently waiting for me to come closer. I didn't. Instead, I took one step back, then, and I whispered, "Don't ask me why. It just felt right." "What do you want?" There was no response, but the scraping stopped, and then, slowly, the blackout curtain peeled itself down. I didn't see hands. I didn't hear footsteps. It just slid away, like it had been unhooked by the air itself. Behind the glass, nothing, just my reflection, and behind my reflection, words written in fresh condensation on the inside of the glass. "Almost awake, not yet." I backed away, heart in my throat. My flashlight flickered, snot out, just inconsistent, like something was interfering. The room behind me had changed, subtly, yes, but changed. The furniture was still there, but wrong. The lamp was now facing a different direction. The coffee mug I'd been sipping from sat untouched on the table, full to the brim, despite me draining it hours ago. And the clock, frozen, 3:12, still. I blinked, then again, still 3:12. I walked into the room like I was stepping through glue, each step harder than the last, like gravity had tripled. And, with every blink, the room twitched, imperceptibly, like a misfiring dream. Chair tilts left, plant moves an inch, picture frame upside down. I tried to speak, couldn't, tried to scream, only breath came out. My body stopped moving. I felt my fingers lock, legs seize, neck stiffen like something had reached inside my muscles and pulled all the strings at once. And then, a voice, right behind me, close enough to stir the hair on the back of my neck. It didn't sound human, but it wasn't monstrous either, just tired, so tired. It said, "You're not asleep enough." And then, the world blinked, like literally, it blinked, like the whole apartment had eyes, and it just closed them for half a second. When they opened again, daylight, sun streaming in through the windows, my phone buzzing next to me with a bunch of missed calls and texts. 3:12 a.m. was long gone. It was now 9:47 in the morning. The clock worked again. The fridge hummed. The neighbor's dog barked. I checked the window. No writing. No condensation, just a clean ordinary pane of glass. The blackout curtain was still down, neatly folded on the floor. It should have comforted me. It didn't, because nothing in the apartment looked quite the same. The lamp had always been on the left side of the couch, hadn't it? And I was almost certain that coffee mug had a chip in the rim, that now it looked brand new. I went to my notebook, fingers trembling. The page was blank, not erased, just clean, like the words had never been written at all. No stay asleep, no messages, no warnings, just an empty page, waiting for something. So I wrote. What changed? I stared at the words for a full minute, then I blinked, and when my eyes opened, a reply had appeared underneath in small, delicate handwriting. You did. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. Instead, I sat on the floor, surrounded by lamps, music, every sensory anchor I could think of, and around 2:45 a.m., the notebook's pages started to flip on their own, not wildly, not like a horror movie cliché, just a slow, even flutter, one after another, and then it stopped. The open page read, "Almost ready, keep dreaming," and underneath that, barely visible, in a different hand, "You don't remember the first time, do you?" That question hit harder than it should have, because I didn't. I had no idea what it meant, but something inside me whispered, "Yes, you do. You've just forgotten how to look." And that's when I started remembering, not like a rush of memories, more like echoes, dreams I'd had as a child, rooms I knew I'd never been in, a staircase that descended forever but felt familiar, a door with no knob that pulsed with heat, and the writing, always the writing, "Stay asleep," scrawled in crayon, paint, fog, blood, different mediums, same message. It had followed me across lives. I wasn't just having nightmares, I was trapped in one, and something was trying to lull me deeper, not to scare me out, but to cradle me in, until I never questioned it again, until I forgot what it meant to be awake. It's a weird thing, remembering a dream, inside a dream. The lines blur. You're not sure if you're remembering, or just making something up in the moment, but some part of you knows, like the air itself has memory, and you're just breathing it in again. That's how it felt when the phrase "stay asleep" started echoing in places it didn't belong. I'd walk into the bathroom, fogged up from a shower I hadn't taken, and it would be written on the mirror. Open the fridge, and the milk carton label would read, "Best if you stay asleep." Even the TV, when I turned it on, would flash a single frame, too quick for the eye, but slow enough for the mind. Just one blurry line of text in white on black. You were happier when you didn't know. I stopped leaving the apartment after that. Didn't trust anything outside. The hallway seemed longer than usual. The light from the ceiling buzzed at the wrong frequency, like it was humming a tune I almost recognized, something from childhood, but warped and slowed. And whenever I pressed my face to the peephole, the hallway was too empty, as in, not even real. Just a blank stretch of space that didn't look like any building I'd ever seen. One time, there was a door across from mine. The next day, it was gone. I didn't ask questions anymore. Instead, I started recording, writing in the notebook, taking voice memos. Not that I trusted my phone, but it gave me the illusion of action, and every time I scribbled down something I thought was new, the page would flip by itself to reveal it was already written, sometimes days earlier, sometimes years, written in my own handwriting. "Who's copying me?" I asked aloud one night. The notebook didn't answer that time, but the window did. The condensation formed slowly, like a breath exhaled across the glass. This time, the message was shorter. "We are." I don't know why that hit me harder than all the others. Maybe it was the plural. Maybe it was the idea that there was more than one version of me, of this, of them. Or maybe it was the horrible thought that I'd been complicit, not a victim, an accomplice. After all, How many times had I let this happen? Forgotten and re-forgotten. What if that was the dream? To not know. I decided to test something. I stayed up for 3 full days. Didn't sleep. Barely blinked. Kept all the lights on. Ate cereal straight from the box, like a sleep-deprived raccoon with a Netflix addiction. And nothing happened. No messages. No flickering lights. No time loops. By day 4, I thought I'd beaten it. I'd cracked the system. Outlasted the dream logic. Then I got a knock on my door. 3 soft taps. Perfectly spaced. Not menacing. Almost polite. I froze. Waited. Then opened the door just a crack. The hallway was different again, but not empty this time. There was a man standing there. Or rather, a version of me, but older. Tired looking. Like I hadn't slept in years. He looked me in the eye and said, "You're doing it again. Just let it happen." I slammed the door shut before I could hear anything else, but his voice still reached me, not through the door, through the air itself. It whispered, "The longer you fight it, the more it hurts." That night, I gave in, lay down on the floor, lights off, phone face down, no music, no fan, just the hum of whatever machinery ran this whole thing. I felt sleep crawl up my spine like ivy, and just before I slipped under, I saw the notebook's pages flutter again. This time, a single line appeared. "Remember, the dream is the prison, the message is the key, and under that, you've almost found the door." I didn't dream in the usual sense. I dropped into a memory, a house I hadn't seen in decades, my childhood home, just before we moved away. I was 7. It was the night I sleepwalked into the backyard, and my parents found me trying to dig my way down. They said I was muttering in my sleep, "They're under us, they're under us." At the time they thought it was just a phase, but now, I'm not so sure, because in the dream, I wasn't digging, I was uncovering, and below the dirt, a trapdoor. I remember touching the metal ring, pulling it open, but I woke up before I could see what was inside. The next morning, my fingernails were packed with dirt, the soles of my feet were muddy, and my hands were scratched raw, but I hadn't left the apartment, not physically, at least I hope not, because when I opened the fridge that morning, there was a small scrap of paper next to the eggs, folded once, tucked neatly like a note in a lunchbox. It read, "Dig deeper." I don't remember writing it, but the handwriting was mine. Of course it was. And suddenly, I realized I hadn't been staying asleep. I'd been diving. Every night, one layer lower, one version deeper, and the phrase "stay asleep." It wasn't a threat. It was a command, a protection, from whatever was waiting if I ever made it to the bottom. There was something soothing about admitting I'd lost track of what was real, like I'd stopped fighting the current and finally let it carry me wherever it wanted to go. That's not to say I liked it, but surrender has a flavor, a weird relief. I slept a lot after that, and each time I woke, the world felt slightly rearranged. Sometimes my bookshelf would be reversed, alphabetical, but backwards. Sometimes the faucet knobs were switched, hot on the right, cold on the left. Once my entire bed was on the ceiling, not levitating, just up there, like gravity had politely changed the rules for the night. I blinked, and it was back, but the memory stayed. I started finding messages in less obvious places, inside dreams, yes, but layered under sound, hidden in background noise. As one night, I was dreaming about walking through a snowy forest, the kind of dream where your footsteps don't make sense, where they sink too deep, or don't land at all. Somewhere in the dream, there was a low wind, just a gentle whoosh between trees, but if I listened just right, it was speaking. "Stay asleep, stay asleep, stay asleep." No breaks, no punctuation, just a whispered mantra. I woke with blood in my ears. Nothing serious, just that faint tinny taste when you pinch your nose wrong or hold back a sneeze. But it made me wonder, was the dream telling me to stay asleep, or was it someone else sneaking the warning into my dreams before they got erased again? Because that's what it felt like, a loop with memory leaks. Somewhere between falling asleep and waking up, things were getting deleted or replaced. The window kept fogging over, always with new phrases, but now they weren't warnings. They were reminders, like sticky notes from a version of myself who still had his act together. Don't follow them past the third door. Clock hands lie. Whoever offers you tea is not your friend. Ask the mirror your real name. I didn't even have a mirror, not a big one, anyway. But when I stood in front of the microwave door at 3:33 a.m., the reflection winked at me. Things escalated after that. There was a knocking, not just on the window now, but from inside the walls, like someone pacing in the crawl space between my apartment and the unit next door. But here's the problem. My unit was the last one at the end of the building. There was no next door, just a brick wall. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I pounded back. 3 knocks, just like theirs. And I said, half joking, half mad, "Who is it?" Silence. Then a 4th knock, slow, heavy, followed by a breathy voice, low and intimate. "You are." I didn't respond, didn't move, barely breathed. Then the lights flickered, and the voice whispered again, almost apologetically, "You're already through the first door." First door. There were 3. Right. That's what the window said. Don't follow them past the third door. I started thinking, maybe this wasn't a haunting. Maybe it was a map. Each dream I'd had, each layer, was a door. The first was the familiar one, my apartment, but slightly off. The second had started recently. The place I went when I fell asleep now wasn't quite my room. It was a version, a double. The outlets were shaped wrong, the shadows cast in the wrong direction. And the third, I hadn't reached that yet. Or maybe I had, and didn't know it. I began preparing, not physically. There wasn't much to do, but mentally, I braced myself. Every night, before sleep, I'd repeat the clues, like a mantra. Clock hands lie. Don't drink the tea. Ask the mirror your real name. Third door is a trap, and I'd whisper them into the recorder on my phone, hoping they'd stick. Then on the 7th night, because of course it was 7, I slipped into sleep, the same way I always did, and woke up someplace new. It wasn't a dream, not the usual kind. The floor was red, not painted red, red like meat, and the walls pulsed, gently, like breathing. Overhead, no sky, just ceiling tiles that rippled like water. It didn't feel evil. It felt old. There were voices, but distant, chanting something slow and rhythmic, not words I understood, just syllables. Sha-ta, Kalum, Sha. I moved carefully, didn't run, didn't call out, just placed one bare foot in front of the other, until I reached what could only be described as a mirror. Not glass, something else. Liquid. It shimmered and rippled, like the surface of a still pond after a whisper, and I saw me inside it. But not this me. Another one. He looked stronger, tired sure, but aware. He raised a hand and wrote a word on the other side of the mirror, drawing it slowly, in fog or frost, or maybe breath. Name. I hesitated, and then for the first time in years, I said it aloud. Not the name on my license, not the one I give to strangers or mail carriers. The real one, the one I barely remembered, the one that belonged to me before. The mirror accepted it and shattered. When I woke, my pillow was soaked, but not with sweat, water, cold pond water, and in my hand, clenched tight, was a shard of glass. Only it wasn't from any mirror I owned. Etched into the corner, in tiny, looping script, was a phrase I hadn't seen before. Door 2 complete. I didn't go to work that day. Didn't call in either. I don't think I even had a job anymore. It sounds ridiculous now, but I can't remember quitting or being fired. I just stopped going, and no one followed up. The world outside my apartment kept humming along, but it felt like I'd been slowly uncoupled from it, like a train car quietly detaching in the middle of the night, and no one notices until morning. That morning, the mirror shard was still in my palm, cold, smooth, laced with hairline cracks, like frost spreading from the corners. I set it on the windowsill beside the other clues. It didn't fog, didn't change, but it glinted whenever I wasn't looking straight at it. The house had gone quieter after the mirror dream. Not peaceful, just calm, the way a deep lake is calm right before something huge moves beneath it. And then there was the sound, low, constant. It had started that night, just after I laid down, a faint hum, like an old refrigerator or power transformer. Only it wasn't coming from the kitchen. It came from inside the wall behind my headboard, and it pulsed, like breathing. I tried recording it. The mic picked up nothing, but I could feel it in my teeth, like the bass line of a song you don't know is playing, until a glass rattles on the shelf. I asked out loud, "What do you want?" And the hum stopped. Then a new word fogged onto the window. Door 3, says. Now I should have stopped. Really, every horror movie teaches you this is where the fool presses onward, because he has to know. Classic red flag. But I missed it again. I wasn't brave. I was tired. Tired of feeling like someone else was writing my life in chalk. And every morning they wiped half the words away. So I laid down. No ritual, no prep, just face first into the pillow, and drifted straight into whatever waited. And this time, there was no slow descent. I blinked, and I was already there. It looked like my childhood bedroom. The wallpaper was that pale green pattern, with little faded clouds, the twin bed with the astronaut sheets, even the wooden dresser with one leg replaced by a stack of textbooks, just like I remembered. It smelled like dust and orange peels. The window showed nothing, just black, like someone had painted over it from the outside. And I was aware this was the third door. The space felt different, tight, like the air was made of molasses, that turned slowly, careful not to disturb anything. And there on the bed was a shape. It looked like me, 8 or 9 years old, lying still, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. And then, he turned his head and smiled. "Hey," he said, "you're late." That's when I realized what the third door really was. It wasn't a place. Not exactly. It was a meeting, between past and present, memory and truth. The boy me patted the space beside him on the bed. I hesitated, but eventually sat down. His voice was soft. I didn't want to be alone anymore. He pointed to the corner of the room. And that's when I saw it. Something tall, too tall, standing motionless in the shadows. It had no face, no hands, but it held a mirror, just like the shard I'd found, but full-sized and round, like a scrying glass. And inside it, reflections moved, not of the room, not of me, of other versions, parallel lives, maybe, some happy, some not. One that screamed without sound, hammering fists against the inside of the glass. My child self looked at me with tears in his eyes. He said if I stayed asleep, he'd let me keep the good dreams. I whispered, "You don't have to listen." He looked down. But we already did. We always do. The creature moved then, slow, graceful, like a curtain catching wind. It tilted the mirror forward, just slightly, and the glass shimmered, and for a second, I saw myself, not just as I was, but as I'd been, would be, could be, versions that never stayed up too late, never opened that window, never asked to know more. There was a deep sound, like the low note of a piano struck underwater, and a single phrase echoed through the air. One of you may leave. I looked at the kidney. He looked at me, and without speaking, we both understood. It wasn't a trap. It was a choice. One of us would wake up, the other would stay behind, and dream forever. I won't lie. I hesitated, because in that moment, it wasn't about bravery or self-sacrifice. It was about fear, of waking, of returning to the hum, the window, the endless questions. The boy smiled again. It's okay. I think I'm ready now. He reached for the mirror, touched the surface, aching, and just like that, he was gone. The room faded, the shadows melted, the hum vanished like it had never been there at all. And I woke up, back in my bed, drenched in sweat, but smiling through tears. The mirror shard on the windowsill was gone. In its place, a message, door 3 closed. Welcome back. That morning, everything felt lighter and heavier all at once, like my body had been returned to me after years of rental, like my bones had remembered their own shape again. The apartment was still dim, but the shadows didn't press in so tightly. The window, still grimy, still cracked, was just a window again. No more fog writing, no humming in the walls. Nothing moved that shouldn't. Nothing whispered from beneath the bed. For the first time in what felt like weeks, I made coffee. I even opened the fridge, mostly expired stuff in there. Cheese with a conscience, milk playing host to new civilizations. But I smiled, because it meant I'd come back to it, that I was still in the version of reality where the little things mattered. I kept glancing at the window, half expecting another message to smear across it, but the glass stayed stubbornly blank, except for my own reflection. I went outside. The light hurt a little, like stepping out of a cave after years underground, but the sun was warm, the trees were green, and the sky was blue, not the washed-out, ashen gray I'd grown used to during all those liminal days. I walked without aim, past the laundromat, the tiny bakery on Maple, the bookstore that never seemed to be open. People were talking again, not to me, but to each other, laughing, yelling into phones, holding iced coffee, like it was the antidote to some invisible plague. And the strangest thing, I felt okay with it, not isolated, not invisible, just unburdened. For once the silence inside my head wasn't a warning, it was peace. Later that afternoon, I gathered the objects, the ones I hadn't thrown out, the bent spoon, the dream key, that weird patch of carpet with the burn mark, all the little breadcrumbs from my descent. I took them to the dumpster behind my building, dropped them in, one by one, and as I stood there, about to toss the last item, the frayed dream journal, I hesitated, not out of fear, but because part of me wanted to remember, to keep something, proof that it hadn't all been a hallucination cooked up by insomnia and black mold. I flipped to the last page. The handwriting was shaky, like someone had scrawled it in the dark with trembling hands. Door 4 is waiting. I dropped the book in anyway, let the lid fall shut with a solid clang, and I told myself I wouldn't look back. I tried, I really did, but that night, I lay awake in bed longer than usual. No fan, no white noise, just me and the quiet. I kept thinking about the boy in the dream, the version of me who gave up his spot. Was he still in that room, still dreaming the same dreams, over and over, like a skipping record, or had he faded completely now, into some kind of limbo archive? The thought made my chest feel hollow. Then something strange happened. I must have drifted off eventually, because I dreamed, not like before, not the layered, prophetic, mirror-drenched nightmares. This was simple, I was back in that same field, the one from the earlier dream, the one with the tree stump and the crows and the shifting horizon. But now the sky was filled with stars, millions of them, glittering like tiny scars across the black, and at the base of the stump sat a single object, a closed book. I walked to it, picked it up, and even though I didn't open the cover, I already knew the title, Stay Asleep. When I woke, the room felt warm, lived in, the way it used to before all this started. I stretched, rolled over, looked out the window just in time to catch the early morning sun, brushing the glass with soft amber, and there etched lightly in condensation, just one more word, rest. No menace in it, no trick, just a suggestion. I smiled, and then for the first time in longer than I can remember, I went back to sleep. The next few days felt like the slow thaw after a deep freeze. It was like the gears of the world had started turning again, quietly, cautiously, but still turning. I went to the corner store and didn't worry about reflections. I washed dishes and didn't see faces in the silverware. I even opened the hall closet without bracing myself for something to reach out from the coats. The apartment had its silence again, but it was real silence this time. The kind you get on snowy mornings or long, content evenings with no TV on. Not that hungry silence I'd been living with before. Not that waiting, coiled quiet like breath held behind drywall. It was weird getting used to peace. Turns out, when you've spent that long in a fun house of your own subconscious, reality feels flat by comparison. I started reading again. Not grimoires or cursed PDFs or forum posts titled, "They Watch Through Mirrors," just books, novels, paperbacks from the free library down the street. I even journaled a little, mostly mundane stuff, tried a new kind of cereal, caught the neighbor's cat staring at me through the window again, noticed that my own reflection doesn't quite line up in the toaster, probably just warped metal, but still, ha, the one thing I hadn't done, told anyone, not about the dreams, or the messages, or the door, not even about the window, because even now, even after all this, what could I possibly say? Hey, quick question, has your apartment ever told you to stay asleep? Still, I wasn't naive. Some part of me knew this peace wasn't permanent, not paranoia, just instinct, like how you know summer won't last forever, even when the air feels eternal, and that knowing, it made me pay attention to the little things again, the way the floorboards creaked in unfamiliar rhythms, how my plants all leaned away from the window instead of toward the light. The cold spot near the laundry room returned, not constantly, but enough to notice. It never lasted more than a few seconds, but it was always accompanied by this faint metallic scent, like warm batteries, or the inside of a flashlight after it's died. Classic red flag, but I missed it. Again, then came the tapping. Not Knox taps, like long fingernails gently testing glass. Not constant, not rhythmic, just occasional. I'd hear it late at night, when I was almost asleep. Soft little clicks on the window pane, and every time I opened my eyes to look, nothing was there. No words, no shadows, no shapes, just a blank sheet of fog on the glass, and my own tired face staring back. Still, I didn't panic. I told myself, if I don't react, it can't feed off me, which now that I say it out loud, sounds like something they might have planted in my head. But that strategy worked, sort of, until the morning I woke up to writing again. Not a phrase this time, not a warning, or a whisper, or a dream command, just a name, written in the same smeared, reversed handwriting, as if someone had traced it with a fingertip from the inside out. Marla, that was my mother's name. She died when I was a teenager. Cancer, sudden, not the kind of thing you connect with haunted windows, except We used to live in this apartment, briefly, just the two of us. Right after the divorce. I'd forgotten, honestly. It didn't last long. We moved in the spring. She was gone by that fall, and I went to live with my uncle in another state. I never connected this place to her, not until that moment. I stood in front of that window for a long time, watching the name fade slowly, as the morning sun dried the glass, like it had never been there. I didn't feel afraid. I felt like something was asking to be remembered. Not malevolent, not sweet either, just insistent. I said her name out loud once, softly, Marla. The walls didn't shudder, the lights didn't flicker, but the cold spot near the laundry room pulsed, once, almost like acknowledgement. That day, I dug through my old shoe boxes, the ones I'd avoided for years, found a few crumpled photos, one of her and me, on a picnic blanket in the park, one of her in this very apartment, standing near the window with a coffee mug. I hadn't looked at that picture in over a decade, and suddenly, I remembered, when she first moved us here, she told me she didn't like the window in the bedroom, said it made her feel exposed on the wrong side of the glass. I laughed at the time, like any surly teenage brat would, but now I wondered, had it written to her too? Had it said something she never told me? I kept the photo, taped it on the wall near the window. No ceremony, no sage or candles, just placed it there. The next morning, the window was clean. No fog, no condensation, no lingering names, just glass, and this faint, almost imperceptible warmth behind it, like something had passed through, or finally let go. After that morning, the apartment changed again. It wasn't dramatic. No lights exploding or mirrors cracking, just small shifts. Barely perceptible, the air felt less heavy. The corners of the rooms didn't feel like they were watching anymore. Even the cold spot near the laundry room softened, like it exhaled. Still, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd opened something. Not a door exactly, not a portal or a crack in the veil or whatever you want to call it, but maybe a memory, a permission, like saying her name gave something else. License to speak too. That night, I woke around 2 a.m. No noise, no nightmare, just awake, like my brain had been nudged gently by something it didn't understand. I lay there, listening. No tapping, no footsteps, just the soft whir of the fan and the occasional creak of old wood shifting in the walls. I closed my eyes again, but I couldn't fall back asleep, and that's when I noticed it. My window wasn't fogged up, even though the room was warm, and the outside air had dropped low enough to frost the fire escape. My window stayed perfectly clear, almost too clear. So I sat up and looked, and this time, instead of writing, there was something drawn, a small delicate symbol, barely visible, a spiral, maybe, or an eye, smudged like a fingertip had brushed it in haste. It was written from the inside, and right above it, almost out of sight, unless I leaned very close, were 3 words: she was listening. Now that didn't sound like a threat. It didn't even feel ominous, but there was something about the tense that stuck with me. Was like whoever had left that message knew she was gone, like they were answering a question I hadn't asked. I sat in the dark for a long time, staring at those 3 words, trying to decide if that was a kindness or a warning. Eventually, I got back in bed. I didn't sleep, but I stayed very still, and around 3:30 a.m., just before dawn, the smudges disappeared, slowly, like steam fading from a mirror. The next day, I left the apartment for a few hours, walked aimlessly, got a sandwich, sat on a bench by the river, and watched geese hiss at each other, like tiny feathered demons. And I thought a lot about sleep, not just the act of it, but the space it puts us in. That twilight chamber where the real and unreal hold hands. It's funny how thin that veil gets when you're alone in a quiet room. Funny how easily something can step through when you're halfway between waking and dreaming. That night, I took extra care getting ready for bed, closed every cabinet, unplugged the microwave so it wouldn't hum, checked the window, nothing there, just my reflection and the slow glow of a streetlight behind me. I slipped into bed and let my thoughts drift like leaves in warm current, and just as I was starting to fade, not sleep yet, just hovering, I heard it again. Not a knock, not a tap, a whisper, but not in the room, from the window, like it was between the panes, caught in the glass. I couldn't make out words, just the shape of them, soft, familiar. I didn't open my eyes, I didn't move, I just listened. The voice faded after a few seconds, and in its place was this deep, low hum, not mechanical, not threatening, just present, a vibration in the chest more than a sound in the ears. I remember thinking, so this is what it means to be watched kindly. The following morning, I found a feather on my windowsill, not inside, not outside, pressed between the two panes of glass, as if someone had slid it in from a space that shouldn't exist. It was small, soft gray, frayed at the edges. I stared at it for a long time, and instead of panic, or fear, or dread, I felt something stranger, recognition, like I'd seen that feather before, in a dream, or a memory too old to trust. I left it there, not out of fear, but out of respect, like a note pinned to a door that isn't mine. I stopped trying to figure things out after that. There's a kind of peace that comes from surrender, not in a dramatic movie ending way, just letting the questions float instead of forcing answers. Maybe something lives in the in-between. Maybe it whispers warnings through condensation in dreams. Maybe it watches us as we sleep, not to hurt us, but to guide us in its own strange sideways language. Sometimes, I still wake up and find words, little things, rest easy, still here, or just names, my own, or ones I don't recognize, always written from the inside, always gone by morning. I don't try to clean the glass anymore. I let it write when it wants to, and I listen, because if I've learned anything, it's this. Whatever it is, it's been watching a long time, and it doesn't want us afraid. It just wants us asleep, safe, quiet, dreaming. I think about that first message sometimes, the way it had appeared so stark and sudden, stay asleep, like a command scratched across reality itself, like something had been panicked, or desperate, or just trying really hard to get my attention. I keep wondering what would have happened if I hadn't, if I'd ignored it, if I'd washed the window that first night and gone back to sleep without a second thought. Would I still have heard the footsteps? Would the whispers have found their way in? Would the feather have appeared? Or would it have just moved on to someone else? I know how this sounds. Trust me. I wouldn't believe it either if it hadn't happened in the quiet hours of my own life, when the world goes still and the sky stretches open like soft black velvet, and things that don't belong start to feel normal. I still live in the apartment, by the way. People ask me why I don't just move, why stay in a place where the walls breathe and the windows whisper, and the answer is simple. Really, because it feels like someone's watching over me, not like a guardian angel. That's too bright, too clean, more like an old soul stuck between stories, brushing messages onto glass when they think I'm not looking. And I've come to appreciate that, not love it, not even understand it, but accept it. I've also stopped trying to take photos of the messages. I tried, early on. They never showed up, even video, always blank, just condensation and a faint glare. Feels like it only writes for eyes, not for lenses. I guess that's the rule. You don't get to prove it, you just get to live it. Classic horror logic, right? No evidence, just trauma and vibes. But hey, I've had worse roommates. Some nights, I still get scared. I won't lie, there are moments when I wake up and swear I saw something move just beyond the window pane, like a shadow pacing the fire escape, back and forth, like it's waiting for me to not look this time, or like it's checking in. I've even caught myself whispering to it, saying things like I'm still here, or I heard you. As I roll over, I don't know if it can hear me, but sometimes, in the morning, there's a faint smudge in the condensation that looks like a response, like a smile, or a fingerprint. The writing doesn't come every night, only when I need it, I think, or when I've been pushing too hard, skipping rest, letting the world get too loud. It shows up, like a subtle nudge, a gentle reminder in a ghostly font. Sleep, let go, you're safe. I don't know who or what leaves those words, but I believe them, even when I shouldn't, especially when I shouldn't. There's one last thing. It happened 2 weeks ago. A dream, I think. I was lying in bed, asleep, but not deep, and I heard tapping, not on the window this time, but on the wall, right behind my headboard. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I sat up, heart pounding, expecting to see something standing at the foot of the bed, but there was nothing. Then slowly, I turned toward the window, tall friend, and written there, in big looping strokes, like it had been drawn with a finger dipped in steam, was a new message. It's your turn to listen. I haven't seen anything since then. No more messages, no more whispers, just the usual hum of night, and the occasional shifting of old pipes. But I still look, every morning, every night, waiting, not for fear, not for proof, just to know I haven't forgotten how to hear, because the quietest voices are often the most important, and sometimes, the only thing they ask of us is to stay asleep. So now, as you rest there, maybe beneath a blanket, maybe curled up on your side, your eyelids just a little heavier than before, let the world fall away a little, let the edges soften. You don't have to solve anything tonight. You don't have to chase answers, or figure out where the messages came from, or why they were written in the first place. That part doesn't belong to you. Not right now. Right now, you get to drift. You get to breathe. In the dark, warm calm of your space, whatever it looks like. Maybe there's a fan humming softly. Maybe a window cracked open, letting in a whisper of cool air. Maybe, just maybe, something is watching over you too. Not with malice, not with hunger, but with quiet intention, with care. A presence that understands sleep is more than rest. It's surrender. And that sometimes the deepest safety is found not in locked doors or lights left on, but in trust, in letting go, in allowing the dark to hold you. So wherever you are, whether you're nestled in bed, dozing off on a couch, or lying back with your eyes half shut, let this be your invitation to stay asleep, to listen, not with your ears, but with your dreams, to remember, just faintly, that not all shadows are waiting to pounce. Some are just watching, waiting, guarding the ones who know how to listen. Sleep well now. Let go. Let the quiet take over. You're safe here. You always were.